Callie Finn, welcome. I just love how it's the WNBA off season, but they are keeping us busy. The
It-
news, it's a popping off season. And this is how I like it because its counterpart, the MNBA. I know a lot of people don't like when we say that, so I just did it on purpose. But the NBA is like year round, even though the games are not year round. And the WNBA is starting to match that as well. So exciting times because the new expansion team, the Golden State Valkyries, the expansion draft is this Friday, Callie. This Friday at 6:30 p.m. I cannot wait to watch this, and I still cannot believe today is Tuesday. So we are 3 days away from that draft, and we've had no leaks about
no.
anything, Callie, which is remarkable to me. So I'm wondering if that will hold. And I mean, I'm just so excited about this draft. I really want to see who teams will pick.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that too. I feel like the overall sentiment going into just like learning what the format would be for the expansion draft was, wow, like how are we not going to know these lists? But I remember asking around the ACES facility and I heard people saying like that's what makes the most sense. Like, can you imagine the drama that it would cause and like the feelings that wouldn't be protected if some players didn't see their selves on those lists? So I think, I mean, I would expect that these lists will remain out of public knowledge. Maybe after the draft, we can like surmise. But I don't think that we're gonna get those leaks anytime soon.
I mean, I get from their end, the team perspective and players, why they wouldn't want to know, but I think it's ridiculous. I do think it's something that the media should know. And I mean, come on, like, I understand that they're all elite professional basketball players, but you have to know if you're not one of the stars or main players on the team, you're probably not going to be protected. I feel like I don't think that should be a shock to people. People understand if they're role players or bench players or even players. Like if you don't get rotation minutes on a team, are you really expecting that team to protect you, you know? So I just feel like we're adults and I don't know. It should be able to be something that can be publicized. But with that said, it's probably not going to. So, Callie, you have been studying this expansion draft, getting all the details down. So, can you give us a little 101 so viewers can understand what this is all about and what they should be looking out for come Friday?
Absolutely. I think that the main thing to understand is just the basics. The Valkyries have the opportunity, as the WNBA worded it, to select a player from each of the 12 existing WNBA franchises. That doesn't mean that they have to select a player. And then, of course, there are parameters to the types of players that they can select. So, obviously, each team can protect six players, which means regardless of their status, unrestricted free agent, whatever, they cannot be selected by the Valkyries. Also, the Valkyries cannot draft an unrestricted free agent who has been cored twice. So that applies to like
Back up a
high.
second, explain what coring means, and then
Okay,
continue.
absolutely. Oops, sorry, I've messed up my my situation. So coring is kind of like the franchise tag in the NFL. It's a designation that the WNBA front offices can put on a player, saying this player is integral to our organization. We need them. It gives them priority negotiating rights and going into free agency. That also means that they're going to give that player the supermax like contract. So that is really just like a franchise tag. I think that's the easiest way to think of that. So yeah, the Valkyries cannot draft an unrestricted free agent who has been cored twice in their career. That includes like Nneka Ogwumike, Tina Charles, even Brittany Griner is not like that. So it doesn't matter. So that what's interesting about that though is that means it changes the protected list. If you have Brittany Griner on your team, you don't have to add her to your list of six players that you're protecting. So that's pretty interesting. The Valkyries can draft an unrestricted free agent that has not been cored twice, but only one player can match that description. So that's also pretty interesting. Like they have one unrestricted free agent available. That's it. And I think what's really interesting I think the way to think about
What do you
this,
mean by that? They have one unrestricted free agent available.
like Kelsey Plum, for example, is an unrestricted free agent. She like if the Valkyries were to select somebody like Kelsey Plum, if she were to be left unprotected, which I think is unlikely from the Aces, then that would be the only unrestricted free agent that the Valkyries could take in the expansion draft. Does that make sense?
At all, over all the 12
Yes.
teams.
Like they can only
Okay.
select one unrestricted free agent
Okay.
in all of their from
Understood.
all yeah, like total.
Okay.
So then, yeah, I think that the way to think about this is that this is only the start of the Valkyries roster. This is not these are not the players that they will ultimately have forever or even for the upcoming season, because we have to remember free agency opens up in January, which means that these are just the players that they have entering that period. And we know this is going to be a super interesting free agency period with all of the changes in the league.
Yeah, and by those changes, you mean things like the union opting out the players, opted out of the collective bargaining agreement, and we know that there's a new media deal coming in. So we know most players are not trying to have contracts that extend beyond this year. I'm curious what someone who is unrestricted would do, probably like a year contract, because they want to wait until the media rights kick in for those larger payouts. So going to be a very interesting period. So based on the fact that the Valkyries can select up to one player per team, and even though they don't have to, that means at most they can select up to 12 players.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. But there are reasons why they may not actually select 12 players, because they may have plans to try to acquire players in other ways, right, Callie?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can also, so this is something interesting that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, is they can negotiate with, like, they could be negotiating with teams right now and we don't know. I mean, I would hope that we would get some little tips about that type of information, but they could, like, you, let's say that you don't have like you don't have enough spots on your protected list, but there's somebody that you really want to keep from the Valkyries, then you could negotiate with the Valkyries for like future draft selections or whatever. Like you could make, deals for the upcoming free agency. Like that's something that's completely possible. And the WNBA outlined that in its guidelines for the draft. Like it's not like these parameters are guidelines. Obviously, there are some firm rules, but it won't be the only way that the Valkyries roster gets built.
Right. They will have the trade, they will have free agency, and they'll be able to trade players too. And so, look, we're not going to sit here and speculate right now on who they'll potentially draft, because without knowing the players that are protected, I mean, we can sort of guess by each team, but it would be pure speculation. And there are those who engage in that. So if you are interested in that, I just encourage you to Google. There are so many lists out there floating with who they might potentially draft from each team. But again, it's an unknown, especially because sometimes teams may shock you with the players they protect. Sometimes it may not always be the people you think. Especially if a team doesn't have like 6 players it really, really needs to protect in terms of its star cores or main players, they may protect a player because of their contract. It's an easily movable contract, or to trade or to package for something later. So because we don't know who's protected, really hard to speculate on who the Valkyries might draft. But Coach Natalie, my namesake, who you know well from covering the Aces, I think ball movement is something she's mentioned before in the past about players that she might try to target. So anything else based on knowing her that you think attributes, qualities she might be looking for in players?
Yeah, I mean, I think in her introductory presser, she really emphasized how badly she wants players who want to win. I mean, she said point blank, if you're somebody who's okay with losing, we don't want you on the team. Like, she wants people who are upset after losses. She definitely was like an incredibly, like, you could see the edge that she provided and practices. Very, very vocal coach, defense focused. I don't know if she's spoken a lot about that, but I know that's something that's really important to her. So I think, yeah, ball movement is going to be important. I think that, I mean, shooting is something that's going to be key to her as well. I mean, so I think it's interesting. I mean, personally, not exclusive from those comments that I just made, I am really curious to see who, I guess, the cornerstone of this organization will be. Like that's something that is really interesting to me, because when you think about it, it's most likely going to be a player who's young. Maybe it's a player who hasn't really like found the right fit in the league yet. Like that's what they're likely going to end up with from this expansion draft. I look at, well, maybe I'm not going to say the players that I'm thinking of, but like I do think that that's what's really going to stand out. I think it's going to be somebody very young who Natalie and her staff, which is still growing, can develop.
Yeah, it could also be someone that they draft in this draft or next year's draft, which I'm guessing they'll probably even have a higher pick than 5. But you never know. They may exceed expectations this year. We never know because we don't know what that team is going to look like. So I am so excited for this expansion draft. Exciting times in the W as it grows. Callie, thank you for giving us that 101 and breaking it all down. You guys should be tuned in for that. We will be tuned in. And then next week we can come back and react to that expansion draft. Thank you, Callie. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks.